Ben Carter stood frozen outside the glass conference room on Meridian Corporation's 32nd floor, USB drive trembling in his sweaty palm. 3 months of desperate work. His last chance to save Carter and Associates from bankruptcy. Through the transparent wall, he watched a woman in a sharp black suit reading files with surgical precision. Alexandra Reed, the CEO who would decide whether his 8-year-old Madison would keep her home or join the ranks of kids whose daddies couldn't make it work. Ben crept along the hallway, pretending to check his phone while stealing glimpses of the woman who held his future hostage. She looked up without warning. Piercing blue eyes locked onto his like a sniper finding her target. Ben's body turned to stone. She rose with calculated grace, walked to the door, opened it with deliberate slowness. "Next time if you want to look, just ask. No bad acting." Her voice cut through the air like ice. Ben stood there, stunned and crimson-faced, as those penetrating eyes seemed to strip away every defense he'd built since becoming a widowed father. 3 years earlier, Ben Carter had been Portland's rising star architect. Corner office overlooking the Willamette River, projects spanning from luxury condos to innovative schools. Then the phone call came at 2:13 in the morning. Sarah's car wrapped around an oak tree on Highway 26. Rain-slicked roads, no other vehicles involved. Just his wife of 10 years, gone in an instant, leaving behind a 5-year-old daughter who kept asking when Mommy was coming home from her really long sleep. The clients disappeared first, then the big contracts. Word traveled fast in Portland's tight-knit architectural community. Ben Carter couldn't handle the pressure anymore. Missed deadlines became the norm. Creative vision turned into scattered sketches on napkins during Madison's soccer practices. Now Carter and Associates existed in name only, operating from a cramped office above Pete's coffee shop on Division Street. The rent was 3 months overdue. "Daddy, are you okay?" Madison had asked that morning, tugging at his wrinkled shirt as he rushed to pack his presentation materials. Her backpack hung off one shoulder, blonde curls escaping from the ponytail he'd attempted twice before giving up. "You look worried like when you think about Mommy." Those 8-year-old eyes held wisdom that broke his heart daily. Ben knelt down, straightening her Disney princess backpack with hands that still shook when he thought too hard about empty beds and silent houses. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Daddy has an important meeting today, the kind that might help us keep our house." He kissed her forehead, inhaling the strawberry scent of her shampoo. Madison wrapped her small arms around his neck, squeezing tight. "I don't care about the house, Daddy. I just want you to stop looking sad all the time." Her words followed him to the car, echoing through downtown traffic as he navigated toward the glass towers that housed Portland's corporate elite. Now, standing in Meridian Corporation's marble and steel hallway, Ben felt every ounce of desperation weighing on his shoulders. The community center project represented more than just a contract. It was his chance to prove that loss didn't have to mean failure. That a single father could still create something beautiful in a world that seemed designed to tear families apart. Alexandra Reed stepped back, allowing him entry into her domain. "Mr. Carter, I presume?" Her voice carried a hint of amusement now, the ice melting just enough to confuse him further. The conference room smelled of expensive leather and fresh coffee. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Portland's skyline, Mount Hood visible in the distance like a snow-capped promise. Ben's hands fumbled with his laptop as 3 other executives filed in, their faces wearing the polished neutrality of people who made million-dollar decisions before lunch. Alexandra took her seat at the head of the table, her movements precise and economical. Every gesture seemed calculated for maximum impact. "Please, begin whenever you're ready," she said, but her eyes never left his face. Ben plugged in his USB drive with fingers that betrayed his nervousness. The first slide appeared on the massive wall-mounted screen. Meridian Community Center, a building that looked like hope made of glass and steel. "This isn't just a structure," Ben began, his voice finding strength as he described curved walls that embraced rather than enclosed. "It's a sanctuary for families who need connection more than they need luxury." The other executives scribbled notes, their expressions gradually shifting from skeptical to intrigued. Ben spoke about natural light flowing through reading nooks where single mothers could find respite, while their children played safely nearby. About workshop spaces where fathers could teach their sons woodworking, while daughters learned coding in adjacent tech labs. His voice grew steadier with each detail, passion overriding panic as he painted pictures of community rising from architectural innovation. The playground section incorporates sensory elements for children with special needs. Ben continued, clicking to a slide showing adaptive swings and textured pathways. Because every child deserves to feel included, regardless of their circumstances or abilities. He caught Alexandra's eye as she leaned forward slightly, her pen frozen above her notepad. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding that went deeper than professional interest. The presentation lasted 43 minutes. When Ben finished, silence stretched across the room like a held breath. The other executives exchanged glances, their body language suggesting approval mixed with surprise. This wasn't the desperate pitch they'd expected from a failing architecture firm. This was vision backed by genuine understanding of what communities actually needed. Alexandra closed her notebook with a soft snap that seemed to echo off the glass walls. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. That was illuminating." She stood, prompting the others to follow suit. "We'll have our decision by Monday morning." The dismissal was polite but firm. As the executives filed out, Alexandra lingered, her blue eyes studying Ben with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "Your daughter," she said suddenly. "You mentioned her in your presentation. What's her name?" The question caught Ben off guard, too personal for a business meeting. "Madison," he replied, unsure why this information mattered to the CEO of a major corporation. "She's 8. Goes to Lincoln Elementary." Alexandra's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, like clouds passing across a clear sky. "Madison Carter," she repeated, as if testing the name on her tongue. "Does she happen to enjoy origami?" The question was so unexpected that Ben's brain stuttered trying to process it. How could Alexandra Reed possibly know about his daughter's latest hobby? Yes, actually. She's been obsessed with paper cranes lately. Learned from a new friend at school. Ben's confusion must have been written across his face because Alexandra's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Children make the most interesting connections," she said, gathering her materials with deliberate precision. "Sometimes they see possibilities that adults miss entirely." The comment felt loaded with meaning Ben couldn't decode. Walking toward the elevator, Ben replayed every moment of their interaction. Something about Alexandra's demeanor suggested this meeting meant more than just business. The way she'd asked about Madison, the flicker of recognition in her eyes. It felt like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. His phone buzzed as the elevator doors opened. A text from Madison's teacher. Madison and her new friend Sophie presented their joint origami project today. Beautiful work from both girls. The name hit Ben like a physical blow. Sophie. He'd heard that name whispered excitedly during Madison's bedtime stories for the past 2 weeks. "Sophie's really smart, Daddy, and she understands about missing people." Madison had said that just 3 nights ago, her voice carrying the weight of recognition that only children who'd experienced loss could share. Ben's finger hovered over his phone screen, pieces clicking into place with startling clarity. That evening, Madison bounced through their front door with more energy than Ben had seen in months. "Daddy, guess what? Sophie invited me to her house for a sleepover this weekend." She dropped her backpack on the hardwood floor of their modest craftsman home, the sound echoing through rooms that still felt too empty despite 3 years of adaptation. Her mom said yes, But I have to ask you first, because she wants to make sure all the parents are comfortable with arrangements. Ben knelt down to Madison's eye level, studying her animated expression. Tell me about Sophie's mom, sweetheart. What does she do for work? Madison scrunched her nose in concentration, blonde curls falling across her forehead. Sophie says her mom works in a really tall building downtown. She makes important decisions about buildings and stuff. Kind of like you, but bigger. The innocent description sent chills down Ben's spine. Portland had dozens of tall buildings, hundreds of executives, but the timing felt too coincidental to ignore. What's Sophie's last name, Madison? Ben kept his voice carefully neutral, not wanting to alarm his daughter with his growing suspicions. Madison tilted her head, thinking hard. Reed. Sophie Reed. She just moved here from California with her mom. No daddy, just like us, but opposite. The confirmation hit Ben like a sledgehammer. Alexandra Reed had a daughter named Sophie, same age as Madison. Both girls were missing one parent, creating an instant bond between children who understood loss without needing explanations. Sleep eluded Ben that night. He lay in his king-sized bed, still too big for one person after 3 years, staring at ceiling shadows cast by streetlight filtering through gauze curtains. Alexandra Reed knew exactly who he was before he'd walked into that conference room. She'd recognized his name, connected him to Madison, understood the implications of their daughter's friendship. But why had she seemed so distant during the presentation? Why the careful professional facade when she clearly knew their families were already intertwining? Monday morning arrived with the weight of unanswered questions. Ben dropped Madison at school, watching her run toward a small brunette girl who waved enthusiastically from the playground. Sophie Reed had her mother's piercing blue eyes and the same economy of movement, even at 8 years old. The girls hugged like sisters, immediately launching into animated conversation about weekend plans and shared secrets. Ben's heart clenched watching Madison experience the pure joy of friendship with someone who truly understood her world. His phone remained stubbornly silent until Thursday afternoon. When Alexandra's name finally appeared on his caller ID, Ben's stomach dropped. 4 days of silence rarely preceded good news in the business world. Mr. Carter, this is Alexandra Reed. Could you come to my office? We need to discuss your proposal. Her voice carried none of the warmth he'd imagined during sleepless nights of speculation. Professional distance had returned, creating walls where Ben had hoped to find bridges. The 35th floor of Meridian Corporation housed the executive suites, a realm of hushed conversations and power decisions that shaped Portland's skyline. Alexandra's corner office commanded views in 3 directions, the city sprawling beneath floor-to-ceiling windows like an architect's dream made manifest. She sat behind a desk that could have doubled as a small aircraft carrier, her expression unreadable as Ben settled into the chair across from her. Your design was exceptional, Alexandra began, her words measured and careful. Innovative, practical, emotionally resonant. Everything we hoped to find in a community center proposal. Ben's heart began to lift until he caught the subtle shift in her tone. The but was coming, inevitable as winter rain in Portland. However, we've decided to explore other options. The board felt your firm lacked the resources to handle a project of this magnitude. The rejection hit harder because it was delivered with surgical precision, no room for argument or appeal. Ms. Reed, Ben said, fighting to keep his voice steady. If this is about Sophie and Madison... Alexandra's hand cut through the air like a blade, stopping his words mid-sentence. This has nothing to do with our daughters, Mr. Carter. This is purely a business decision based on objective criteria. But her eyes told a different story. They held the same guarded pain Ben recognized in his own mirror. The look of someone who'd learned that mixing personal feelings with professional obligations led to devastation. Ben stood slowly, dignity requiring him to accept defeat with grace even as his world crumbled around him. I understand. Thank you for your time and consideration." He turned toward the door, each step feeling like walking through quicksand. "Mr. Carter." Alexandra's voice stopped him at the threshold. When he turned back, her professional mask had slipped just enough to reveal the conflict beneath. "For what it's worth, your design would have been perfect. In a different world, with different circumstances, it would have been exactly what Portland needed." The drive home passed in a blur of traffic lights and half-formed thoughts. How would he explain to Madison that they might lose their house? How could he tell his 8-year-old daughter that sometimes good wasn't enough, that the world operated on calculations that ignored hope and focused solely on bottom lines? His phone buzzed with a text from Madison's school. "Early dismissal today due to teacher conference. Please pick up by 2:30 p.m. Madison bounded into the car with her usual post-school energy, chattering about math tests and playground adventures. "Daddy, Sophie's mom said she might be able to come to my school play next Friday. Isn't that exciting?" Her innocence cut through Ben's despair like sunshine through storm clouds. How could he explain that Sophie's mom had just destroyed their family's financial future? That sometimes adults made decisions that hurt everyone involved, including themselves? "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart." Ben managed, his voice steadier than he felt. Madison buckled her seatbelt, humming a tune she'd learned in music class. "Sophie's been sad lately, though. She says her mom has been working really late and looks worried all the time, like how you used to look before you started smiling again." The observation carried wisdom that 8-year-olds shouldn't possess, understanding born from experience with adult pain. Friday evening brought Madison's school play, a production about community helpers that showcased third-grade enthusiasm over theatrical skill. Ben sat in the front row of Lincoln Elementary's multi-purpose room, surrounded by other parents wielding phones like paparazzi capturing Oscar moments. Madison played a bridge, literally and metaphorically, connecting different parts of the community through her arms and infectious smile. When the curtain fell, she scanned the audience until her eyes found Ben's, her face glowing with pride at his presence. "Daddy, did you see me? I was the bridge that helped everyone connect." Madison threw herself into Ben's arms with the full force of 8-year-old exuberance. Over her shoulder, Ben spotted a familiar figure near the back of the room. Alexandra Reed stood partially hidden behind a pillar, her usual business attire replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. She applauded politely, but her eyes held the same conflicted expression Ben had seen in her office. Their gazes met across the crowded room. For a moment, neither moved. Then Sophie appeared at Alexandra's side, tugging on her mother's hand with urgent 8-year-old energy. "Mommy, can we go say hi to Madison and her daddy? Please?" Alexandra's internal struggle played out across her features, professional caution warring with maternal instinct and something deeper that Ben couldn't quite identify. She nodded reluctantly, allowing Sophie to lead her through the crowd of departing families. "Mr. Carter?" Alexandra's greeting was carefully neutral, but her eyes betrayed the turmoil beneath her composed surface. Sophie immediately launched into excited conversation with Madison about their respective performances, their friendship evident in shared giggles and secret whispers. Ben watched his daughter light up in ways she rarely experienced, the pure joy of connection with someone who understood her unique perspective on the world. "They're quite a pair," Ben observed, keeping his voice as neutral as Alexandra's, but allowing warmth to creep in when discussing their children. "Madison hasn't had a friend like Sophie before, someone who understands what it's like to have only one parent." Alexandra's composure cracked slightly at his words, her professional mask slipping to reveal vulnerability that made her seem suddenly more human and infinitely more complex. "Sophie feels the same way," Alexandra admitted, her voice softer than Ben had ever heard it. "She's been happier these past few weeks than I've seen her since we moved to Portland. Madison has given her something I couldn't, the knowledge that she's not alone in missing the family structure other children take for granted." The admission cost her something, vulnerability exchanged for the chance to acknowledge their daughter's special bond. The school hallway began to empty as families departed for weekend activities. Madison and Sophie continued their animated conversation, oblivious to the adult tension surrounding them. Ben sensed this moment balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word could shatter whatever fragile understanding existed between him and Alexandra. "Ms. Reed," he began carefully, "regardless of business decisions, I hope Sophie and Madison can maintain their friendship. They clearly need each other." Alexandra's eyes searched his face as if looking for hidden meanings or ulterior motives. "Mr. Carter, there's something you should know about why I rejected your proposal." She glanced around the nearly empty hallway, ensuring their conversation remained private. "It wasn't about your qualifications or your firm's resources. Your design was brilliant, exactly what Meridian wanted to build." Ben's confusion must have shown because Alexandra continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I couldn't award you the contract because of this." She gestured toward their daughters, still deep in conversation about weekend plans and shared dreams. "The board would have seen it as favoritism, my personal feelings compromising business judgment. I've worked too hard building my reputation to risk accusations of mixing professional decisions with private relationships." The explanation made sense from a corporate perspective, but Ben heard the pain underlying her logical reasoning. "So you sacrificed a perfect project to protect your professional image." Ben kept any judgment out of his voice, but his words still landed like accusations. Alexandra's shoulders straightened, her defensive instincts engaging despite the genuine conversation they'd been sharing. "I protected my daughter's future security. Sophie depends on my career success for her stability. I can't jeopardize that for anyone, regardless of personal feelings." The silence that followed stretched like a tightrope between them. Both parents stood trapped by responsibilities that demanded sacrifice of personal desires for their children's welfare. Ben understood her position even as it destroyed his dreams. Single parents lived in constant fear of one wrong decision unraveling everything they'd built from the ashes of loss. Alexandra had chosen the safe path, prioritizing long-term security over short-term opportunity. "Mummy, can Madison come over for dinner tomorrow night?" Sophie's innocent question shattered the adult tension like a stone through glass. Both parents looked down at their daughters, who had apparently solved all the world's problems while the grown-ups struggled with complications. "Please, Daddy," Madison added her voice to the request, hope shining in her eyes like Christmas morning expectations. "Sophie says her mom makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches in Portland." Ben looked at Alexandra, seeing his own internal conflict reflected in her expression. Their professional relationship had ended before it truly began, but their daughter's friendship transcended business considerations. "If Sophie's mom doesn't mind an extra mouth to feed," Ben said carefully, "Madison would love to come over." Alexandra's surprise was evident. She'd expected him to maintain distance after her rejection of his project. 7:00, Alexandra said after a moment's hesitation. "Sophie's been asking for weeks to have Madison visit our house. It seems cruel to disappoint them because adults can't navigate professional boundaries." Her words carried an edge of self-criticism that suggested she questioned her own decision-making process. Ben nodded, understanding that this dinner invitation represented an olive branch extended across the wreckage of missed opportunities. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of Pacific Northwest drizzle that made Portland feel like a watercolor painting left in the rain. Ben and Madison drove through tree-lined streets in the West Hills, ascending toward addresses that spoke of success and security. Alexandra's house materialized through the mist like something from a magazine spread. Contemporary lines softened by native landscaping, warm light spilling from oversized windows that promised comfort within. Sophie answered the door with Madison-level enthusiasm, immediately dragging her friend toward what sounded like a playroom filled with laughter-inducing activities. Alexandra appeared behind her daughter, her usual business attire replaced by jeans and a cable-knit sweater that made her look younger and more approachable. "Welcome to our chaos," she said with a smile that seemed genuine rather than politely fabricated. "I hope you're prepared for 8-year-old energy at maximum volume." The house smelled of vanilla candles and something delicious cooking in the kitchen. Family photos dotted surfaces and walls. But Ben noticed they only featured Alexandra and Sophie. No evidence of the father who had once been part of their story. Children's artwork hung in expensive frames, elevating Sophie's crayon masterpieces to gallery status through maternal love and professional presentation skills. "Your home is beautiful," Ben said, meaning it sincerely. The space felt lived in despite its magazine-worthy aesthetics, toys strategically placed to suggest a child's presence without creating chaos. Alexandra had created sanctuary from the demands of corporate leadership, a place where she could simply be Sophie's mom rather than Meridian Corporation's commanding CEO. "Thank you. It's taken time to make it feel like home rather than just a house." Dinner conversation flowed easier than Ben had anticipated. Sophie regaled them with stories about her previous school in California, her words carrying the adaptability of a child who'd learned to find stability within change rather than location. Madison shared tales of Portland adventures, describing favorite parks and secret hideouts with the confidence of someone who'd never lived anywhere else. Both girls spoke about their father's absence with matter-of-fact acceptance that broke Ben's heart, while simultaneously inspiring him with their resilience. "Sophie's daddy lives really far away now," Madison explained to Ben, as if he hadn't been present for every conversation about absent parents. "But Sophie says that's okay because some families are just different shapes, and different doesn't mean wrong." The 8-year-old wisdom struck both adults silent for a moment, children once again demonstrating emotional intelligence that surpassed adult understanding. After dinner, the girls disappeared upstairs to Sophie's room, their voices carrying down through hardwood floors and area rugs. Ben helped Alexandra clear dishes, their movements around the kitchen developing an unexpected rhythm of domestic cooperation. "They're remarkable," Ben observed, stacking plates with practiced efficiency born from 3 years of single parenting. "The way they've processed loss and found strength in shared experience. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for," Alexandra replied, rinsing glasses with careful attention to avoid eye contact. "Sometimes I think Sophie handles our situation better than I do. She's adapted to change while I'm still fighting to control variables that refuse to be managed." The admission surprised Ben with its honesty, vulnerability shared between single parents who understood the weight of decisions that affected more than just themselves. "Control is an illusion anyway," Ben said, drying the wine glasses Alexandra handed him. "I spent 2 years after Sarah died trying to control every aspect of Madison's environment, create perfect stability to compensate for the chaos of loss. All I accomplished was exhausting myself and limiting her opportunities to grow." Alexandra's hands stilled in the soapy water, his words obviously resonating with her own experiences. "How did you learn to let go?" she asked, her voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than polite conversation. Ben considered the question, remembering the gradual process of releasing death grips on variables he couldn't actually influence. "Madison taught me. She started making friends despite my hovering. Showed me that protecting her from every possible disappointment was actually preventing her from developing real strength." Alexandra nodded slowly, understanding passing between them like shared language. The evening ended with both girls pleading for extended time together, their friendship having reached that magical childhood point where separation felt tragic despite guaranteed reunions. Ben and Alexandra found themselves making plans for reciprocal dinners and playground meetings, their daughter's social calendar driving adult interaction that might otherwise have remained professionally distant. "Same time next week?" Alexandra asked as Ben prepared to leave, the question carrying undertones of possibility that extended beyond simple playdate coordination. Madison would never forgive me if I said no. Ben replied, but his smile suggested personal interest that transcended parental obligation. Alexandra walked them to the door, her professional armor completely absent in the warm light of her front hallway. Ben, she said as he reached for his car keys, her use of his first name marking a shift in their relationship's foundation. Thank you for tonight. Sophie hasn't been this happy since before we left California. The drive home passed in comfortable silence, Madison's soft breathing from the back seat, indicating sleep brought on by perfect childhood exhaustion. Ben reflected on the evening's unexpected intimacy, not romantic, but the deeper connection between people who shared similar struggles and found understanding in parallel experiences. Alexandra Reed, the CEO, remained formidable and distant, but Alexandra, the single mother, was someone he could imagine building friendship with, maybe even something more given time and careful navigation. 2 weeks later, Ben received an unexpected email that changed everything. The message came from Meridian Corporation's legal department, formal language wrapping around an extraordinary proposal. The board had reconsidered their community center approach, deciding to hold an anonymous design competition that would eliminate any possibility of favoritism or bias. 3 finalists would present their proposals in person, with the winning design selected purely on merit rather than firm reputation or personal connections. Ben read the email 3 times before its implications fully registered. Alexandra had found a way to give him another chance while protecting herself from accusations of professional impropriety. An anonymous competition leveled the playing field, allowing his design to compete on its actual merits rather than his firm's limited resources. Whether he won or lost would depend entirely on the quality of his work, removing personal relationships from the equation while preserving the opportunity for excellence to triumph. The competition deadline was 6 weeks away. Ben threw himself into refining his original design, incorporating new elements inspired by watching Madison and Sophie's friendship develop. He added spaces specifically designed for children dealing with loss, quiet nooks where kids could process difficult emotions, art therapy rooms where expression replaced words, and meditation gardens where families could find peace together. The project became more than architecture. It evolved into a love letter to resilience and hope. Madison noticed her father's renewed energy immediately. "Daddy, you're humming again," she observed one morning over breakfast, her spoon dripping cereal milk as she studied his face. "You used to hum when you were designing the house where we lived with Mommy. Does humming mean you're happy about building things?" Ben realized she was right. He'd unconsciously returned to old habits that signaled creative satisfaction and professional hope. "I'm working on something special, sweetheart. A building that could help lots of families like ours." Madison nodded sagely, her 8-year-old wisdom accepting that sometimes adults needed projects to feel important and useful. "Sophie's mom has been humming too lately. Sophie says it means her mom isn't worried all the time anymore." The observation suggested that Alexandra had also found some peace within their complicated situation, professional boundaries coexisting with personal connection. The competition submission process was deliberately anonymous, designs identified only by numbers, architect names withheld until after initial judging. Ben printed his final drawings on a Tuesday morning in late October, Portland's autumn light streaming through his office windows as he carefully packaged months of hope into manila envelopes. The community center looked even better on paper than he'd imagined, every line and curve purposeful, every space designed to heal rather than simply house. 3 days later, his phone rang with news that stopped his heart. "Mr. Carter, this is Jennifer Walsh from Meridian Corporation. Your submission has been selected as one of 3 finalists for our community center project. Could you present your design next Monday at 10 a.m.? Ben's hand trembled as he wrote down the details, hardly daring to believe that his second chance had survived the first round of elimination. Madison's excitement when he shared the news rivaled Christmas morning enthusiasm. "Daddy, does this mean we might not have to move?" Her question reminded Ben of everything riding on Monday's presentation, not just professional validation, but his daughter's sense of security and home. "It means I have another chance, sweetheart. Whether I win or lose, I'm proud of what I created." Madison hugged him fiercely, her small arms conveying more faith than Ben felt capable of deserving. Monday morning arrived with typical Portland weather, rain mixed with hope, clouds threatening to clear or storm with equal probability. Ben dressed in his best suit, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral and Madison's first school play, fabric holding memories of both grief and joy. His presentation materials felt heavier than their actual weight, the portfolio containing not just architectural drawings but dreams made manifest through careful planning and desperate hope. The Meridian building looked different knowing he belonged there, if only temporarily. Ben rode the elevator to the 32nd floor conference room where his future would be decided by people who might not understand that buildings could heal as well as house. Alexandra sat at the head of the table again, her expression carefully neutral as she introduced the 3 finalists to a panel of judges he didn't recognize. Each presenter will have 30 minutes to explain their vision, Alexandra announced, her CEO voice revealing nothing of the woman who made grilled cheese sandwiches and listened to 8-year-old secrets. Questions will be reserved until all presentations conclude. Selection will be based solely on design merit, feasibility, and alignment with our community outreach goals. Ben was scheduled to present last, which meant enduring 2 other architects' visions before sharing his own. The first presentation was technically proficient but emotionally sterile, a building that would function adequately without inspiring anyone who used its spaces. The second showed more creativity, but seemed designed to impress architectural critics rather than serve actual community needs. Ben felt his confidence growing as he recognized that his competition, while skilled, had missed the essential element that separated good buildings from transformative ones: understanding the people who would inhabit the spaces. When his turn came, Ben approached the podium with steady hands and clear purpose. His first slide showed not the building's exterior, but Madison and Sophie working together on an origami project, their heads bent in concentration over delicate paper folds. "Architecture isn't about buildings," he began, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who'd learned this lesson through loss and rediscovery. "It's about creating spaces where human connections can flourish." The presentation flowed like a river finding its course, each slide building upon the last to create a comprehensive vision of community healing made manifest through thoughtful design. Ben spoke about natural light that would lift spirits during Portland's grey months, about flexible spaces that could adapt to families' changing needs, about sensory elements that would welcome children regardless of their abilities or circumstances. His voice grew stronger with each detail, passion overriding nerves as he shared his love letter to resilience. "This building acknowledges that families come in many configurations," Ben continued, clicking to a slide showing the memorial garden he'd designed for parents and children dealing with loss. "Sometimes healing requires spaces where grief can be honored alongside hope, where absence can be acknowledged without defining everything else." He caught Alexandra's eye as he spoke about the playground designed for children missing parents, seeing recognition flicker across her carefully composed features. The questions that followed were probing but respectful, judges seeking to understand not just what Ben had designed, but why he'd made specific choices. His answers came easily because every element had been carefully considered, every space designed with purpose rather than aesthetic appeal alone. When the session ended, Ben felt the quiet satisfaction of having shared his vision completely, holding nothing back regardless of the outcome. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," Alexandra said, as the judges filed out for deliberation. "That was comprehensive." Her choice of words felt deliberately neutral, but her eyes held warmth that suggested approval she couldn't professionally express. Ben gathered his materials slowly, reluctant to leave what might be his final moment in the running for redemption. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "thank you for making this opportunity possible." The deliberation lasted 47 minutes, long enough for Ben to question every word of his presentation, but short enough to suggest the judges had reached clear consensus. When they filed back into the conference room, their expressions revealed nothing about the decision they'd reached. Ben's stomach clenched as Alexandra stood to deliver their verdict, his entire future balanced on whatever words came next. The panel was unanimous in their selection. Alexandra began, her CEO voice carrying formal weight that made Ben's heart hammer against his ribs. "The winning design demonstrates not only technical excellence, but genuine understanding of community needs. Meridian Corporation is pleased to award the community center contract to—" She paused, her eyes finding Ben's across the conference table. "Carter and Associates." The words hit Ben like physical impact, relief and joy and disbelief combining into emotional overload that left him temporarily speechless. He'd won. Not through personal connections or professional favors, but because his design had genuinely been the best. Madison would keep her home. His business would survive. Most importantly, he'd proven to himself that loss didn't have to mean the end of dreams. Sometimes it just meant finding new ways to build them. "Congratulations, Ben," Alexandra said, after the other judges had offered their formal approval and departed. Her use of his first name marked their relationship's continued evolution, professional success allowing personal warmth to emerge from behind corporate necessities. "Your design will make a real difference in Portland, the kind of difference that changes lives rather than just filling space." Her words carried weight beyond polite congratulations, acknowledging the deeper meaning this victory held for both of them. 3 months into construction, the Meridian Community Center began taking shape like hope made visible through steel and glass. Ben visited the site daily, watching his vision emerge from foundation to framework to the beginning of something beautiful. Madison often accompanied him on weekend site visits, her excitement growing as she recognized spaces she'd helped inspire through innocent observations about what kids like her and Sophie needed from the world. "Daddy, is that going to be the reading corner where sad kids can feel better?" Madison asked one Saturday afternoon, pointing toward a partially framed alcove that would eventually house comfortable seating surrounded by natural light and carefully selected books. Ben knelt beside her, both of them wearing hard hats that made Madison giggle with their oversized importance. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. A place where anyone who needs quiet time can find it." Alexandra had become a regular presence at the construction site, her CEO responsibilities extending to oversight of Meridian's largest community investment. But Ben noticed she often lingered after official business concluded, watching the building grow with the same fascination that drew him back each day. Their conversations had evolved beyond professional necessity into something that felt like friendship, two people who'd found understanding in shared experience and mutual respect. "You're creating something special here," Alexandra said one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the building's skeleton in golden light. Madison and Sophie played nearby, their laughter echoing off incomplete walls that would soon house other children's joy. "When I first saw your design, I knew it was exactly what Portland needed. I just didn't expect it to change my perspective on what's possible when we stop letting fear drive our decisions." The admission carried weight beyond architectural appreciation, suggesting that Ben's project had influenced more than just community planning. Alexandra had taken professional risks by creating the anonymous competition, trusting that merit would triumph over her need to control every variable. The success of that gamble seemed to have awakened something in her, willingness to embrace possibility rather than simply managing threats to stability. "Fear kept me frozen for 3 years after Sarah died," Ben replied, his words carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "I thought protecting Madison from disappointment was the same as providing security. All I really accomplished was limiting both our chances for genuine happiness." Alexandra nodded, understanding the parallel between his experience and her own careful navigation of single parenthood while building professional success. The community center's grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday in late spring, Portland's notorious rain finally yielding to sunshine that made the building's glass surfaces sparkle like captured stars. Local news crews documented the ribbon-cutting ceremony, interviews with city officials praising Meridian Corporation's commitment to community development and Ben's innovative approach to accessible design. But for Ben, the real victory was watching Madison and Sophie race through completed spaces, their excitement validating every design choice he'd made. "Look, Daddy, the origami wall," Madison called from the children's section, where hundreds of paper cranes hung from invisible wire, creating a mobile that danced with air currents and symbolized hope rising from careful folding. Sophie stood beside her best friend, both girls marveling at how their shared hobby had become part of something bigger than themselves. Alexandra appeared at Ben's shoulder, her expression soft as she watched their daughters experience pure joy. They inspired that installation. Ben said quietly, not wanting to interrupt the girls' exploration, but needing Alexandra to understand how deeply her daughter had influenced his vision. "Every time I watched them work on origami together, I saw healing happening through creativity and connection. This building needed to honor that kind of magic." Alexandra's eyes brightened with unshed tears, her professional composure cracking just enough to reveal the mother underneath. As families began filling the center's various spaces, parents finding respite in reading nooks, while children explored adaptive playground equipment, Ben felt the deep satisfaction of purpose fulfilled. The building worked exactly as he'd envisioned, creating community through thoughtful design rather than simply housing activities. But more than professional validation, he'd discovered that healing didn't have to happen in isolation. Sometimes the best recovery occurred through connection with others who understood loss and chose hope anyway. "Ben?" Alexandra said as the opening day celebration wound down, exhausted families gathering children for the journey home to dinner and bedtime stories. "I owe you an apology." Her words surprised him, formal acknowledgement of something he'd already forgiven and forgotten. "You don't owe me anything, Alex. You found a way to give me a fair chance while protecting your professional integrity. That took courage I'm not sure I would have had. I almost let fear cost us all something beautiful," she continued, her voice carrying the weight of recognition that decisions made from anxiety rarely produced optimal outcomes. "This building, our friendship, the girls' bond, I could have destroyed all of it by prioritizing imaginary threats over real possibilities." Ben understood her regret, but also recognized the growth it represented, courage learned through experience rather than inherited through genetics. 6 months later, Ben stood in his renovated office space, no longer cramped quarters above Pete's coffee shop, but professional headquarters befitting Portland's newest architectural success story. Projects lined up monthly now, word spreading about the architect who designed spaces that healed rather than simply housed. But success felt different than he'd expected, more meaningful because it included connection and community rather than individual achievement alone. Madison burst through his office door with her usual 8-year-old energy, now almost 9, and growing into the confident, compassionate person Sarah would have been proud to see. "Daddy, Sophie's mom wants to know if we can go to the coast this weekend. She found a house we can rent right on the beach." Her excitement was infectious, the casual way she referenced Sophie's mom, suggesting Alexandra had become family rather than simply her best friend's parent. "Did Sophie's mom mention who we includes?" Ben asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Over the past months, their families had gradually merged social calendars, weekend activities, naturally including both girls and both parents. What had begun as children's friendship had evolved into something deeper, not quite romance, but partnership built on mutual respect and shared understanding of life's complexities. "All of us, silly. Sophie and me and you and her mom, like a real family vacation." Madison's words carried innocent wisdom about the family structures that existed beyond traditional definitions. She and Sophie had created their own version of sisterhood, while Ben and Alexandra had developed partnership that honored both friendship and the possibility of something more, given time and careful nurturing. That evening, as Ben tucked Madison into bed, she surprised him with a question that revealed how closely she'd been observing the adults in her life. "Daddy, do you think Sophie's mom might want to be part of our family someday? Like how some of my friends have step-parents who help with homework and come to school plays?" Her hope was carefully contained. 8-year-old wisdom, understanding that adult relationships required patience and couldn't be rushed through childhood enthusiasm. "Would you like that, sweetheart?" Ben asked, genuinely curious about his daughter's feelings regarding the woman who'd become such an important presence in their lives. Madison considered the question with the seriousness she applied to all significant decisions, her expression thoughtful in the dim light of her bedside lamp. "I think Sophie needs a daddy, and I think her mom needs someone who understands about missing people. You're really good at helping when people are sad." The beach house weekend arrived with perfect Pacific Northwest weather, sunshine mixed with ocean breeze, waves gentle enough for children to splash safely, while adults watched from chairs planted in warm sand. Ben and Alexandra had grown comfortable with domestic partnership, sharing cooking duties and parenting responsibilities with the ease of people who'd learned to trust each other completely. Madison and Sophie treated the vacation like an extension of home, their friendship having reached that magical point where separation was unthinkable. "This feels like what I always imagined family vacations should be," Alexandra said, as they watched the girls build elaborate sand castles that would disappear with the next tide. Relaxed, happy, uncomplicated. She'd changed since that first conference room meeting, professional armor replaced by genuine warmth and willingness to embrace uncertainty. Success had taught her that control was less important than connection, that calculated risks sometimes produced the most meaningful rewards. "Sarah and I used to plan vacations like this," Ben replied, his words carrying memory without the sharp edge of grief that once accompanied any mention of his late wife. She would have loved seeing Madison this happy, this confident. Alexandra reached for his hand, her fingers interlacing with his in a gesture that felt natural rather than forced. 3 years of healing had taught him that honoring the past didn't require rejecting the future. That night, after the girls fell asleep exhausted from sun and surf, Ben and Alexandra sat on the beach house deck, watching stars emerge over the Pacific Ocean. The conversation that followed changed everything, not through dramatic declarations, but through quiet acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing steadily for months. "I never expected to find this," Alexandra said, her voice barely audible over the sound of waves. "Partnership without competition, understanding without judgment." "Neither did I," Ben admitted, his arm around her shoulders feeling like the most natural thing in the world. But Madison was right. Some families are just different shapes. Different doesn't mean wrong. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned that healing could happen together, that love didn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrived quietly, built through shared experience and mutual respect, growing strong enough to support whatever came next. A year later, Ben Carter stood in the same conference room where he'd first met Alexandra Reed, but this time he wasn't presenting architectural plans. Instead, he was watching Madison and Sophie practice their presentation for the community center's first annual origami exhibition, their friendship having inspired an art program that brought families together through creativity and shared purpose. The girls had grown closer than sisters, their bond forged through understanding that only children who'd navigated loss could share. "Are you nervous?" Sophie asked Madison as they arranged their paper crane collection on the conference table, hundreds of delicate figures representing hours of concentration and mutual teaching. "A little?" Madison admitted. "But good nervous. Like when Daddy gets excited about new buildings." Both girls had inherited their parents' appreciation for careful planning mixed with creative vision, approaching challenges with confidence built through experience rather than inherited privilege. Alexandra entered the room wearing the smile Ben had come to associate with her happiest moments. Pride in Sophie mixed with satisfaction in watching dreams become reality. 2 minutes until showtime, ladies. Are you ready to demonstrate your origami mastery to Portland's finest cultural critics? Her words carried gentle teasing, but Ben heard the genuine pride underneath. Sophie had blossomed under the influence of friendship and community, growing from a shy, guarded child into someone who embraced new experiences with enthusiasm. The presentation was flawless, both girls explaining their techniques with poise that would have impressed corporate executives. They spoke about patience, precision, and the way small folds could create something beautiful when accumulated with care. Their message resonated beyond origami instruction, touching on themes of growth, transformation, and the magic that happened when people worked together toward common goals. Ben felt his throat tighten, watching Madison command the room with confidence Sarah would have celebrated. Later, as the community center filled with families attending the exhibition opening, Ben reflected on everything that had changed since that first disastrous encounter outside Alexandra's conference room. His architecture firm now employed 6 people, projects extending beyond Portland to communities across the Pacific Northwest, seeking spaces designed for healing rather than simple function. But professional success felt secondary to personal transformation. The discovery that families could be built as well as born, that love could grow from friendship when nurtured with patience and respect. "Penny for your thoughts," Alexandra said, appearing at his side with the quiet grace that had initially intimidated him, but now provided comfort. She wore a blue dress that matched her eyes, professional elegance softened by maternal warmth as she watched Sophie guide younger children through basic origami techniques. "Just thinking about how much has changed since I tried to spy on you through a conference room window," Ben replied, his words carrying amazement at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "You mean since you demonstrated the worst surveillance skills in corporate history?" Alexandra's teasing held affection rather than mockery, their shared history now source of humor rather than embarrassment. "I knew immediately you were watching me. The question was whether you were nervous about the presentation or trying to figure out if I was as intimidating as my reputation suggested." Ben laughed, remembering his terror at being caught staring and the way her unexpected warmth had gradually replaced professional distance. As the evening wound down, families gathering tired children for the journey home to dinner and bedtime routines, Ben found himself standing exactly where his new life had begun, outside a conference room where desperate hope had met unexpected possibility. But instead of clutching presentation materials with sweaty palms, he held Alexandra's hand while Madison and Sophie argued good-naturedly about whose origami techniques were more advanced. The space that had once represented his last chance for professional survival had become the foundation for something infinitely more valuable. Home rebuilt through connection. Healing shared rather than shouldered alone. "Next time if you want to look, just ask. No bad acting," Madison suddenly announced, perfectly mimicking Alexandra's words from that first encounter. Both girls dissolved into giggles while their parents exchanged the kind of glance that passes between people who've learned to find humor in their origin story. Ben squeezed Alexandra's hand, silently grateful for the moment when catching him staring had led not to embarrassment, but to everything he'd never dared hope was possible. Some stories end with grand gestures and dramatic revelations. Others conclude quietly, like Portland rain giving way to sunshine, gradual, natural, beautiful in its gentle transformation. As Ben Carter walked out of Meridian Corporation for what would definitely not be the last time, his daughter's hand in his and his heart full of possibilities he'd learned to embrace rather than fear, he understood that healing didn't require forgetting the past. It simply meant building a future strong enough to honor what was lost while celebrating what had been found. The community center stood gleaming in the distance, its lights welcoming families seeking connection and hope. Inside those carefully designed spaces, children would learn that different family shapes were all valid, that creativity could transform pain into beauty, that love came in many forms when hearts remained open to possibility. And somewhere in the building, Ben had designed but could never have imagined, origami cranes danced on invisible currents, paper transformed through patience into symbols of everything that became possible when people chose connection over isolation, hope over fear, and love over the safer but emptier alternative of remaining forever protected and alone.